is actually. But Sunshine is actually my middle name.
Right.
Yeah, but it's on the birth certificate. Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's I find I'm a little bit jealous of people who say like actors or musicians who they have like their actual last name is not like really doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Right. Well, that's
like
my
not,
last. My last name is Heitman, so very very Germanic and not.
And also, and also like especially in terms of like actors where it's like it sounds really not Hollywood or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, but then they find like, oh, I have a middle name, and then and that one it sounds like really, it just sounds like a name.
Yeah.
And so they just tend to, and then they'll like use that.
Yep.
Or
that's exactly
even if like or even if they're like they don't really like their first name, it's like, oh, I'll go by my middle name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it definitely makes sense to try and have a stage or a professional name that's evocative of whatever you're trying to be successful at. I often say and in different interviews I've said this before, that with a name like mine, I wasn't destined to become a doctor or a lawyer. It seemed pretty evident that a career in the arts was in my future from an early age.
Yeah, like I myself do not have a middle name. So like if people ask me what my middle name is, I don't answer.
Yeah,
it's like, well, what is it? I'm like, that was it.
Yeah. Nice. Nice.
And then you'll find people who like, I have 2 middle names. Wait, so that means you have no middle names.
Right. That's true. That's true. I always have trouble, people. I have a bass player who was from Mexico and he had a whole string of names. His name was Jorge, but he had like 5 different names, and I couldn't tell which was of precedence or which was the I don't know the theory behind how all those strings of names work.
I think in that case it's like the trend tends to be like your actual name that you'd be referred to by, and then like who you're descendant of these few people, and then where your family hails from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And like, and then there's, and at least that one makes sense. But then there are a few people who they have like 12 names, and it's just because like their parents wanted to like fill out a bingo card. Like Kiefer Sutherland, the actor.
Yeah.
If you look at his like wiki page and you see his full name, it's like it's insane.
Wow. Yeah, I think, and wait, who are his siblings? Also, have they don't all share that? Aren't they all the sons of
Donald Sutherland?
Donald Sutherland, but don't a few of the siblings have names that are not Sutherland? Or maybe I'm thinking of other. This isn't my forte, like But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and it's in the case in your case, I feel like the name Cosmos. That's no,
with an S on the end.
I realize that, but like say Cosmos is not particularly common. But the thing is the name Cosmo, that's it. It's sort of common, but like you've heard it, like it's common enough that you're like, oh, that's a name people name their kids. Yeah. And then you like are just a little bit further off the beaten path. Like, no, it's not Cosmo, it's Cosmos.
Yep. Well, I get a lot of people asking me if I'm, Greek or Italian or whatever, and just because that's kind of embedded in people's consciousness that it's sort of a Mediterranean name, Cosmo or Cosimo. But I say no, and then the next question is, were your parents hippies? And I say, yeah.
That's where sunshine comes in.
Exactly.
That's like predestining you to have a stage name.
Yeah,
with sunshine at the end.
Yep. And I when I was a kid, I was focused on painting and sculpting and things like that. I didn't really discover, although I loved music as a kid, I didn't start to play until I started messing around with instruments when I was about 11 or 12, and then picked up the guitar at 14, which is, I think, pretty late, compared to some kids who are up and running when they're like 4.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. It's earlier than me.
Yeah.
I didn't start playing till I was 17.
Uh-huh. But I know some fine players. Tom Morello actually didn't start until he was a late teen.
Yeah.
And, he certainly managed to make it work for himself.
Yeah. Or like, I think Wes Montgomery, the jazz guitarist,
Yeah.
didn't start playing till he was like 21.
No kidding. Wow. And just totally wrote his own book.
Yeah.
And is tremendously influential. That's great. Did you hear
Yeah,
that bing?
I'm sorry?
Did you hear that bing?
What bing?
I got a notification on my computer.
No, I guess I didn't hear it.
Okay, good.
But were you always like interested in music? Were you always listening to records growing up or something?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my parents had a great record collection, and a big turning point for me was actually, because there was always music in the house. There would be occasional parties at the house where there'd be bands and stuff. My dad knew a lot of people. He was a chef and worked at Wesleyan College, so he tended to have a pretty broad group of friends and went to a lot of concerts. I went to see the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead and the band at Watkins Glen when I was only a year old. They used to take me to see all these concerts. But what really was the turning point for me was when John Lennon was killed in 1980. Mm-hmm. That's when I really caught the bug big time, and became obsessed with the Beatles, because I saw how deeply affected my parents were when it happened. And so, and at that point, I couldn't really distinguish that much between one rock band and another because I heard so much of it. But at that time, my mother was like, no, you really have to understand the importance of the Beatles and John Lennon in particular. So at that point, it really was like, a bolt out of the blue, totally changed my life. And so that's where the real, that's when I got the bug. But it took me a while to really find my instrument and figure out what really was going to click for me.
Yeah. And do you remember like your first guitar?
I do. Yeah, I do. It was the first one that I actually owned was a white Stratocaster copy. I don't remember what brand it was, but it was, it was okay, not too bad. I had borrowed this, mind you, this was in the 80s. So there was lots of pointy guitars around and stuff, there's like,
yeah.
So I had, for a little while, I borrowed from my neighbor, and this is how I actually figured out that I really wanted to play guitar. My neighbor had this really short scale red sparkle Gibson Explorer copy. So it was tiny, and he had started taking guitar lessons. So I started messing around on his guitar and ended up just taking it home with me. And then, then the imitation Stratocaster came into the picture. He got one too.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about how the Strat kind of body is what most people think of when we hear electric guitar.
Yeah.
And like all the like kind of smaller like dinky little like electric guitars that are made for children, they all tend to be like a Strat shape.
Yeah. Well, it's just completely iconic. It synonymous with rock and roll, Leo Fender really got it right, with the Telecaster and Stratocaster straight away. He's a genius, and he didn't even play. I mean, that's the remarkable part.
He wasn't a musician.
No, but man, did he change the world?
Yeah, and I don't know. There's sometimes there's like I don't think I've ever actually picked up a Strat before because for one, like I didn't have money to buy an electric guitar for the longest time.
Yeah,
but also I was like wondering about like what kind of player I would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And thinking about, well, I don't know, would I be a Strat kind of? I'm not really like I'm not so Hendrixy,
right?
And like I'm not. I want
Yeah, that tends to be what I got the Strat because that's what was available and that copy was affordable for me. Yeah. I think it was like $100, $120 in 1980, whatever it was, 86 or something when I started playing. But I mean, although I liked Hendrix and was influenced by him, I was obsessed with Jimmy Page, and I ended up getting and playing primarily Les Pauls after that. But it was interesting because when I got really into Page, also through my mother, because she was a big Led Zeppelin fan. Page was playing with the Firm, and he had this brown Telecaster. So my actual first guitar that I completely lusted after was a Tele. But my first good guitar, I ended up getting a gold top Les Paul, and became, my real go-to guitar after that.
Yeah. After in my attempts at Googling you, I see images, but most of the time I see you playing a Tele.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I have a
swung,
few. I started. I favored the Les Paul primarily through my earlier part of my career, but then I just started to accumulate different ones, and I got a really great GNL. Maybe you saw the Lake Placid Blue GNL Tele that I have. Played that a ton, and they're just so distinct. These different types of guitars have such different sonic. The way they present sonically is so different. Gibsons are a little darker and throatier and more sustain, and Telecasters and Strats, especially with single coils, are more dynamically responsive, a little brighter, a little more snap to the strings. So I go in phases. Sometimes I just am playing only the Tele. Sometimes I'm bringing. Or also, I use a lot of different tunings. So typically, I'll bring like 3 or 4 guitars to every show, which is kind of a pain in the butt, but it's better than having to retune every single time I'm going into another set of songs.
Yeah, I've for the longest time I thought I was gonna be the kind of guy who's like try to have the least amount of gear as possible, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, one acoustic, one electric.
Yeah.
That's all you need, right?
The purest approach. Yeah.
Yeah. But now like the reason, if you like, you might see over there I have a Tele.
Yep. I see
and
that.
For the longest, and the idea was like, well, I see all these people playing Teles, and also I researched the Tele. It's like, well, it's so versatile because the design is so like dead simple.
Yeah, it really is.
And so I was thinking, I'll get a Tele, and that'll be the only thing I need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, yeah, it is. But now I'm thinking, like it's me, like really stepping over into the gearhead kind of thing. It's like, oh, just one more.
Yeah,
just one more guitar.
It happens to everybody.
Yeah.
Even
and now I'm
sorry, even in the 90s when my sort of career took off, I was sort of in the purist space because I had that gold top Les Paul and I had a Marshall Plexi half stack, and I didn't use any pedals. I just plugged into the amp, and that was it for the longest time. But slowly but surely, the pedal thing starts to come into play, and and now I'm fully like online, like lusting after all kinds. I just bought a Dan Electro Fuzz pedal, which
nice,
has actually an octave switch, so it's kind of like the Hendrix Octavider thing.
Oh, cool!
So I'm pretty psyched on that. So
yeah, because a Tele can do so much.
Yeah, they can,
but it can only do so much.
Yeah,
and especially since it only has a couple of single coils, it's like sure, it works for most things, and especially for whatever it's good at. But now I'm like my kind of thinking behind it now is that solid body, single coil.
Mm-hmm.
That's that. Everything it does, it's taken care of.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking about getting like a something like an ES335 because
so great,
semi hollow. That means it's a bit of the solid body kind of sound, but it's still hollow, so it like sounds good acoustically and has more sustain, you could say.
Yeah.
And of course, because they use humbucking pickups. So
there are 335s with P90s in them too. But yeah, I mean, I have the 335 style guitar I have right now is a D'Angelico, and it is really cool because it has a 6-way toggle switch. It has 2 humbuckers that were specifically designed by Seymour Duncan for D'Angelico, and they have built-in coil tapping. So it's like a 6-way toggle. You can run it single coil or humbucking. And so you get all that big, moves a lot of air, that they are really kind of, throaty and big and bold sounding guitars, which I love,
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend it highly. That would be a really good next acquisition. As a 335 type.
Yeah, just this past week, it's really got under my skin. Like I need to get just one more guitar, and it has to be like a 335 type semi-hollow humbuckers to like. I feel like a Tele and like a 335, like they would cover everything you need.
Sure,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I believe that's true. And there are some, like I said, the D'Angelico I got on artist accommodation, so it was super cheap for me. But there's a lot of really good 335, type guitars out there that are not like $3,000 or whatever you'd pay for a new Gibson.
Yeah,
and they're very good. A number of them. I mean, even the Epiphones are really, really quite good.
Yeah, I've been thinking about, since I would never be able to afford an actual like Gibson 335, I'd probably get the Epiphone equivalent, which is I think the Epiphone Dot.
Yep.
That's what it is.
No, they're really good guitars. I almost bought a 1968 335 in the late 90s, and I had the money, but I needed to pay some bills and be responsible. It was only $1,300, $1,300 for a 1968 335 Sunburst. And to this day, I regret not letting my phone get shut off or whatever. Because, now that same guitar is, $5,000 or more, or, if depending on the condition. I mean, the numbers have just gone through the roof,
Yeah, there's something about, like, I can look at all like expensive guitars all day, but then like I close the browser window. I'm like, yeah, never. I'm never gonna have enough money to just throw around to get like an Eric Clapton triple O something or other.
Yeah, I'm glad that I got my really good ones before the prices skyrocketed. Both of my Les Pauls I have a 1990 Standard and a 1993 Classic Gold Top. And I sold my original Gold Top, which I regret. But both of those guitars are fantastic, and I think I got the Classic for $1,000, and the Standard I got brand new for like $1,300 in 1990. So I couldn't afford a new one now either.
Yeah, I guess the most I've spent on like an instrument wasn't even on a good guitar. It's actually that P bass that's hanging on the end there, which I got it brand new, and it was like like $700. But like before that, it's always been like getting used guitars, and like before I got that P bass, the biggest purchase I made was that Tele. It's from like I got it off a guy in Mansfield, Connecticut for like $450.
Nice, that's good. And do you know if is it Japanese or Mexican or American?
Mexican.
Yeah, I have a Mexican Strat that I love. I got it for $300 from a friend of mine in New York, who he wheels and deals like super great, amazing vintage guitars, but he just knew I needed a Strat, and he had this one that already had Seymour Duncan single coils in it. And he's just like, here, give me $300. And this was ages ago, and I still use that guitar all the time. If you see, I had just recently put out a video for this song called Against the Wall, and a lot of the leads in that and the main solo I played that Strat on. And if you see the video, I'm playing it in the solo break, and that it's beat to hell, but it's $300, probably the best $300 I ever spent.
Yeah. And that is that blue Tele your main? Would you call it your main Tele? Or
yeah, that one is. I have two G&L Teles, a white one that I got more recently, which still needs a little bit of setup. It's a great guitar, but it just hasn't really risen to the level of prominence that the blue one is, because that blue one it has a lot of sustain. It does the Telecaster thing, it's bright and spanky kind of sounding, but if you with a little boost, you can get it to really sing and sustain with using a little bit of pedal, a little overdrive or something like that. So it's not kind of exactly like a Les Paul, but it's really about as versatile as any guitar can be,
Yeah.
And the G&L single coils are really quiet comparatively. So that guitar has even been my main guitar for long periods of time.
And do you know where it was made?
Yeah, it was American made.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah, I bought it in, I guess it was probably around 2004 or 2005. I was teaching lessons at this store down on the Connecticut shoreline, and they were a G&L dealer, and I just started playing it, and I just fell in love, and I ended up just teaching lessons to just pay off the guitar, and then I quit as soon as I had it. So, where my priorities are.
Teaching lessons to get the money to pay for the guitar that you're using to teach lessons.
Right. There's a TV commercial to this effect, but I think it's a different thing.
Yeah. And so you said you started playing guitar when you were about 11.
Well, no,
right?
I started playing guitar when I was 14, but I started messing around with drums and different things.
Okay.
Yeah, 14 was when I started playing.
So like generally instruments at 11 and then guitar at 14.
Yep.
Was there like a particular player who like really, like you saw them, you're like, I'm going to pick up one of those, I'm going to play it?
Yeah, well, it was, I guess, first, because at the time, like, it was really the, really flashy Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, I guess, were my favorite guitarists.
Okay.
Before I really played, but it was Jimmy Page who got me really hooked and made me decide that I was going to be that, And it was really, again, an intervention on my mom's part, because I was, obsessing about Eddie Van Halen, who is a fantastic guitar player, fundamentally great rhythm player, great tone. But the two-handed tapping thing, in retrospect, I think it did more harm than good, because people just attached to that technique and at the expense of all the fundamental stuff that really made him such a great player.
Yeah.
So many people just went down that road and forgot that you need to be just a fundamentally good rhythm guitar player and work on your tone and, have phrasing. And so anyway, my mom was like, I know you're really getting into this guitar thing, but you have to listen to this guy. It was Jimmy Page, and she gave me Led Zeppelin 2 and was like, this is it. And I was just blown away, just the energy and the excitement that he was able to generate, but also all the light and shade recording techniques. It got me hooked on the idea of production as well. So, because he wasn't just a guitar player, he was a composer, a producer. So it kind of laid it out for me, of what I wanted to kind of become.
Yeah. And I think even now, you see kids who like want to learn guitar because they're like, hey, can you show me how to play Thunderstruck?
Right.
Or Eruption, or
because for a long time it was Nirvana. Is when I was teaching, every kid wanted to learn how to play "Smells Like Teen Spirit."
Yeah, yeah. But in the case of, at least in terms of like Teen Spirit, it was just the chord progression, and it's not really flashy playing. The flashiest thing is the solo, and he's playing the melody.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, but like all this kind of really flashy playing that I think I do. I think I agree with you that it kind of it's a detriment to an extent, because all these people are like, I'll learn all these riffs, and that means I'm good at guitar,
right?
And I think especially in like my area and demographic, it's all like metalheads who like want to learn all the Megadeth riffs or whatever.
Right. Yep.
And then I'm the only, and then I'm like just some guy in the corner. Like I like learning all the chords.
Yeah.
And like just working on the fundamentals, because I just want to be good at like playing guitar, not knowing all the riffs. Like when I was coming up, I wasn't learning Hotel California. I wasn't learning the Led Zeppelin riffs. I wasn't learning all that stuff. Because I wasn't really interested in that. I was just like, I said to myself, I just want to be able to play guitar. And to me, the flashy riffs that you do to show off to people as like, party pieces aren't exactly you knowing how to play guitar.
No, that's not really music per se. I mean, it's impressing the idea of intrinsic musicality can be hard. I think, especially for a young person, and I fell prey to this myself. Kind of simultaneous with the Led Zeppelin obsession, which I think was a really good obsession because there's so much fundamentally good playing on not just guitar playing, but everywhere you look in that band, there's just an amazing guy doing amazing things, even in an understated way. But I became obsessed with Metallica at the same time, and so I wanted to learn the riffs, and there was not in any way, shape, or form any expression of fundamentally good songwriting in that band. They tried to get there once the Black Album came out and stuff, but it was all about strings of riffs and shouting out your pain. So
and going yeah.
So I'm glad that I saw the light and knew that I needed to, because I honestly, like, I've played with some amazing people and some drummers who are full of chops and amazing players, but sometimes people don't recognize the beauty of a perfect pocket, a backbeat drummer who just swings in that pocket like it's like the most godlike thing, and I feel that way about guitar players. I mean, my favorite guitar players are really guys who really play in the pocket and have a lot of personality, like Ron Wood and Joe Walsh and Billy Gibbons, and these guys, great tone, great phrasing, just solid in the pocket rhythm guitar players, and you can hear from the first note who it is,
Yeah. And when I was checking out your record, your most recent record, The Way Is Clear, I was listening to it, I'm like, okay, this is cool. And then I hear you this guy can actually rip on guitar. Because it's refreshing, because I feel like more often than not, you'll find people who are like singer songwritery kind of artists, and then you talk to them, you see them play, but they pretty much only know how to play like acoustic rhythm guitar. You know what I mean? And it's cool to see someone who there's a difference between playing guitar and being a guitarist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like I kind of see like Bob Dylan through that kind of lens. Mm-hmm. And bear in mind, I'm like one of the bigger fans of Bob Dylan.
Me too.
But let's face it, Bob Dylan plays guitar. He's not a guitarist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He accompanies himself on guitar, and, more than adequate. He's a fine rhythm player.
Yeah.
But, before I even started to sing, I identified myself as a guitarist, and all that entailed. I wanted to be, I got so hooked on so many different streams of music that as I was kind of steeped in the rock and roll, I started to, become obsessed also with folk music, and specifically, British folk. I got really into Fairport Convention and Richard Thompson, who I think is one of the greatest. And Nick Drake became a big influence. So, I wanted to be able to I began getting into using different tunings, so that gives you these more exotic sounding open string voicings, so I never could just be like Angus Young, as much as I love him, and he's a fantastic rock guitar player, one of my favorites, but I just couldn't, there's not enough there for me. So I'm always kind of jumping from one thing to the other and then trying to pull in these influences to present them in a digestible way,
Yeah. And I think like when I was coming up learning guitar, I like coming back to like I didn't want to learn Eruption and whatever.
Yeah.
I think I was less drawn to the flashy playing. I was drawn more to the expressive playing.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like like I think my favorite expressive guitar player is Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
Because like sure he can shred, but it's not like flashy shred. It's
No.
expressive shred.
Right. He puts on speed a little bit when it's to kind of up the ante on an emotional level, because he'll build a solo in a really elegant way, and it really has a start, a middle, and an end, and it develops. And sometimes when you need to kind of lift it a little bit, a burst of speed will do that because it'll pull you back into it,
Yeah.
and especially in his early days, he had so much fire, but it was like, on a kind of a slow burn. But when he turned it on, it really dragged you in, Have you listened to like the Blues Breaker stuff and I'm sure you've heard Cream and everything.
I haven't heard the Bluesbreaker stuff. I've heard actually, to be completely honest, most of the bigger parts of Clapton's discography, I'm not too into.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll listen to Cream every once in a while, but like the big thing that really got me was the Derek and the Dominoes album, Layla, and other sort of love songs.
Yep.
Like I put that thing on for the first time. I'm like, these are the tastiest guitar parts ever.
Yeah.
Especially with like the Dwayne Allman on slide and stuff.
Yeah, I have a big affection for Dwayne Allman and everything Allman Brothers. I was kind of under the wing of Warren Haynes for a bunch of years. His wife managed my old band, so I got to get really close to the Allman Brothers organization. Used to sit backstage behind Dickie's amps and listen to him. His tone was just so unbelievable, and to hear those two guys, Warren Haynes and Dickie Betts, going at it was just, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. It was so profound.
Yeah.
Great. So Dwayne Allman is the wellspring from where all that comes, and so yeah, big fan.
Yeah. And I think the other big record of Clapton's that I like got into was the Unplugged album, but it wasn't for like Tears in Heaven.
Yeah.
It was because like him doing that I can't remember now. Of course, in the moment I can't remember what song it was, but it's one of the like the blues kind of. It might have been a Bo Diddley song where he's like doing the really fast finger style blues. Like
I haven't listened to that one in a long time, but yeah, it's great. I think a lot of people hooked into Clapton at that time. That was a big record for him.
Yeah, and like seeing him do that, like he's the very kind of Robert Johnson kind of keeping the rhythm with his thumb, but he's like comping for himself, but he's still like shredding in between every line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another, as I was saying, different kind of streams of music that I became obsessed with. Most recently, I've always had great love for for Delta blues, particularly Robert Johnson, because he's the name that you hear everybody refer to. But I started to explore some years back. It was actually, have you ever seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yes, I have.
Coen Brothers film. So there's a character who's supposed to be the Robert Johnson character, and he plays this song called Hard Time Killin' Floor Blues, which I then discovered was by Skip James. So I just became obsessed with Skip James and decided, I started to explore and discovered Booker White, who was a big influence on Zeppelin. You hear a lot of his influence on Zeppelin 3. So I started to just naturally gravitate towards trying to play some of that stuff. So I've been training myself to kind of be an adequate Delta and country blues player, which is a big challenge. Actually, it's hard to play that stuff.
Yeah, it is. Like through people like Eric Clapton and Jack White and stuff.
I was going to say Jack White was a big part of me knowing some of the names. Like, he's a big. Now I'm drawing a blank. I know he loves Son House, and I don't know. Anyway, I know I know he's into all that stuff.
Yeah, like so through people like that, I always hear Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson, he's the best. Like no one will ever be better. I'm like, who the hell's Robert Johnson? And then I check out that compilation of his complete recordings.
Yep.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
What it like even Keith Richards when he was first listening, he was like, who's the other guy playing with him? No, it's just him.
Yeah. Yeah, and aside from the technical virtuosity, which nobody has been able to improve upon. There's a lot of people who are Robert Johnson purists who can play that stuff, but as a guy who built up that vocabulary, I mean, of course, he borrowed from everybody, as everyone does, but he crystallized that and presented it in a way that people are just, it's you can't be better than Robert Johnson,
Yeah.
and couple that with the mystique, the aura, the legend. He really was just, the first legit rock star.
Kind of.
He had it all.
Yeah, and I remember, there was one moment when I was listening to Robert Johnson, and I was just thinking, like, if I could play like that, and I think at that time in like the 1930s, like electric guitars were not really a thing then, right?
No, there were some. It was just burgeoning. There was pickups being put into hollow body guitars and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think by the 30s, maybe Django Reinhardt had started playing with a pickup.
Yeah.
I may be wrong about that, but I think Charlie Christian was a fantastic jazz lead guitar player who ended up really informing a lot of people. So I think in the 30s there was starting to be pickups and hollow bodies, but that was just the beginning.
Yeah, and so there was a moment where I had the thought about, like, if I could, like, if Robert Johnson could have done this and I'm just like an acoustic guitar, would I ever need an electric guitar? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in this day and age. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question, but I think given the fact that it's all moved so far, and you kind of, if you don't sort of stay close to the avant-garde in some, at least I'm I guess pretty far from the avant-garde at this point because I'm steeped in rock and blues and stuff like that. But if it's at least in sight, that kind of mandates that you use some more contemporary or modern technology. And you can bring all of that technique that you use on acoustic guitar and bring it over to electric guitar, and it has a different voice and expression. There's obviously lots of things you can't do with an acoustic guitar that you can do with an electric guitar, but an electric guitar will never rival the harmonic bloom of an acoustic instrument. So luckily we don't have to choose. We can have it all.
Yeah. If you got enough money. And
yep.
Also, I don't know, there's I think because there's a difference between like my acoustic guitar playing and my electric guitar playing. Like on electric, I tend not to really play chords too much. And it's more thinking about like what the accompaniment would be on an acoustic guitar, trying to play off that.
Right.
And like playing because whenever I think about electric guitar, it's just lead. Right. And like trying to see how you could fit in like single note runs against the acoustic accompaniment.
Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of both. I because I'm such a big fan of rhythm guitar, and again, Keith Richards is a huge influence. So the potential of rhythm guitar inside an ensemble is so fantastic that I think I tend to. I play a lot of lead guitar, but I tend to always kind of be ready to drop back into the rhythm, and I'm more than happy. I've been in a number of bands where even in my bands where I've had an additional second guitar player, and I have no problem. I really enjoy comping behind, other people's solos and locking in with the rhythm section and being creative about all those sort of textures and pads you create underneath somebody else's lead. So I fancy myself to be pretty versatile that way, because I can really take off and play a lead, but I'm very happy to play some great rhythm too.
Yeah, I think maybe my aversion to playing like electric rhythm is probably just because I don't know how to like set my amp. Because like whenever I try to play chords on like an electric guitar, it just sounds not quite right. I'm like, yeah.
Maybe potentially maybe there's an intonation issue too.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I haven't gotten my guitar set up since it hasn't been set up since before I bought it, really.
Right. That could be, especially here in the Northeast where the seasons are so different. There can be guitars tend to flex and expand and shrink, and so that could be the culprit. But when it comes to setting up an amp, what I typically do is every amp. I don't know what you're using for an amplifier, but
Blues Junior.
Okay, great little amps. I love those things. There's a sweet spot. You want to drive the power tubes because that's when you get the most sort of harmonic bloom and depth and richness. And so I like amplifiers like that where it's like I don't like amps with a bunch of gain stages and stuff like that. I like an amp that you can turn up to the point where it's breaking up and the power tubes are being driven, but not, too dirty, because then it can become a good platform for pedals. And I use a boost and either a fuzz or a distortion pedal, which sometimes I just leave on all the time and just use the boost for lead. So that gives you enough clarity to play good rhythm. And especially if you can turn off the dirt pedal and play very clean, and just set it up with a couple of stages right at that verge and then use the volume control. If you're at top volume, it's breaking up pretty well, but not super distorted. Then you can just back off the volume a little bit and it'll clean right up, and still have all that sparkle and dynamics and stuff. I also find that I tend to roll off the bass to a certain extent, right to the point where it has a lot of weight, and punch. But if the bass is too much for me on the amp, it tends to get a little bit cloudy sounding, and I tend to run a little more mid-rangey and a little brighter, but just enough bass to give it some weight
or definition. You mean?
Well, I if there's too much bass, it tends to lose a little definition for me, I find.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't know. At least lately, I've gone into settings where it's like, well, most guitars, at least in most setups, will probably be like kind of a mid scoop to make room for a vocal or something. So I was thinking like, okay, maybe like leave the bass and the treble here and then turn on the mid a bit. And then I'm like, I guess it sounds fine, but it's still not quite what I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think theoretically that's a sound approach, but guitars sound great with a lot of mid range.
Yeah.
And I don't seem to have trouble having my voice sit in amongst my rhythm guitar either. And I think can be kind of just an automatic thing too. The more you do it, the more, I went from being just a guitar player to starting to sing at around, I guess I started singing around 2000, 2001, 2002. And the more you do it, the more synonymous they become. You're no longer a guitar player, you're a guitar player and a singer. So those two things operate together, So I think you kind of automatically dial in your tone a little bit, and it just kind of tend to work together the more you do it.
Yeah, it would be accurate to say that I have limited experience like messing around with equipment like this.
Yep.
Like I've spent a long time playing guitar.
Uh-huh.
I'm good there.
Yeah.
But then and for the longest time I put off getting an electric guitar because I was thinking like I don't care about tone. I just want to get the facilities here in my fingers. Yeah. And then I like made the leap. I'm like, what the hell does any of this mean? I guess I'm gonna have to figure it out because it's not like I can pay someone to teach me, know.
Well, so much of tone is in the fingers though. That's how so much of the adjustment you make to what's coming out of the amp or even the acoustic guitar is made in your fingers and how you're in your hands. And it's interesting too, because in different rooms and different, humidities, different things can affect the responsiveness of the guitar or the amp, or the guitar and the amp, and how your hands feel, if it's cold or whatever. So you make so many adjustments, minute adjustments, to coax the sound out of the guitar first, and then do the best on the amp you can, because especially in New York City, when it's so hard to get around, you don't want to haul your amp on a subway, and so all the clubs in New York have fixed backline. They'll have drums, full backline, so you have to get used to quickly dialing in any amp that you're confronted with. You could be rolling in and there's like a Fender Twin, loud and clean, so you're going to use your pedals to make it break up and do what you want it to do. Or you can have some, cheesy semi-solid state Marshall half stack, and it's like, oh shit, that's even worse. It's like, what do I do with that? But you have to, get it as good as you can and really, project regardless, and it makes it better.
Yeah, it makes me think maybe I should have gotten a different amp as my first real amp.
Blues Junior is a great amp though, but they are, they're brash, distorto kind of great. It depends on what you want to do,
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this. The the first thing I ever had was a Fender Frontman 10G, which
is that an acoustic guitar amp?
No, it's like a dinky little electric amp that's only like 10 watts, and it's a practice amp made and also like kind of meant for beginners. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, this is fine, and it got the job done.
Sure,
but of course, you want something. It left something to be desired, and it made me think about okay, I was thinking like, oh, definitely not solid state. I'm gonna get a tube amp, even though I don't know how to maintain one. So like Blues Junior, totally Blues Junior. But now I'm thinking like, I don't know, maybe it should have been like a deluxe reverb or something like that, because I don't think, maybe I'm not ready for this, the Blues Junior.
Well, the Blues Junior is a little bit of a one-trick pony, because to get it to any decent volume, it's going to be pretty broken up sounding. It's great for blues, It's, like I said, it's brash, it's got a lot of character, but in terms of versatility, it's not a great amp. Fender makes plenty of great amps that, can be manipulated in such a way. Like, I had a Hot Rod DeVille for a while. It was a 210, 40 watt, had a couple of gain stages. It could be really clean. And actually, I think the clean tone was the best part of the amp. But it got me through for a while, because I was able to, switch it, get into a decent distortion. It was versatile, and it wasn't too expensive. And I used it for a bunch of years after I kind of was I got tired of hauling around a Marshall half stack, so that was my next acquisition, and it worked well for me, So I think that might be your best bet, something that gives you a good, sweet, clean tone, And of course, the Twin is like the ultimate expression of that, but they're just so heavy.
Yeah.
It's like, oof, great amp, but man, heavy.
Yeah, that might be the next really expensive thing I get. Another amp.
Yeah.
Like especially since for as much as I like the broken up tone, how the distortion that Blues Junior brings, I'm all like, I remember back even when I started playing electric, I still didn't care about tone. It was like, hey, it would be other people who had amps. It's like, hey, what's the cleanest setting you have? And I just want to play like that,
right?
And now I'm also like really interested in funk guitar, where the best thing is like
bright, clean,
like a single coil, like a Teller or Strat, and get an amp that gives you really good clean tone, so you can just
Yep, Blues Junior is not ideal for that. You might be able to get close to it by, turning up the amp to the point where it's just breaking up and then roll off your volume, but it still might be a little too quiet for you, when at that point where it cleans up. Yeah, I hear you. It's a lifelong pursuit, chasing tone. And right now I've been My main amp is a little 25-watt Supro, which does most things well. If I turn it up to the point where it starts to break up, it's good and loud, has great reverb, onboard vibrato, which is great, tremolo, I mean. And so I can roll into a gig with a Strat and that amp and coax a lot of interesting tones just by using the vibrato a little bit, jacking the reverb, because the reverb's amazing, depending on the gig. If I do like a full band show of my own, then I bring the pedal board and I bring, a few guitars with me to really coax a whole range of different tones out of it. But if I'm going to just play guitar with somebody, I can literally just do it with a Strat and my Supro and be happy, So, but it's not a cheap amp. It was, I think I paid like $1,400 for it.
Oh,
so yeah. So luckily, the guy who sold it to me was a gentleman and allowed me to pay it in installments.
Amps on layaway.
Yep. Not my first one. I've definitely had amps on layaway before.
Yeah. I also have to get into like using pedals, which I don't know. The understanding an amp and how it works is hard enough, and it's like, oh, you can put other things in front of it, pedals, and it's just I'm like, more things I have to learn about.
Yeah, I would definitely focus on the guitar and amp synergy, and get to a place you're really happy, and then introduce a pedal like, I don't know, a delay or something that, even a wah-wah, even if you're not going to be doing a lot of wah-wah-ing, you can turn it on and set it, and it becomes like a filter. It filters off all frequencies and allows it to really cut, and it's great for doing leads, and it'll help it cut through the band, But you said you were into playing some funk, so a good funk wah-wah thing is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, wah-wah's a good starting pedal for sure.
I mean, actually, I think that when I was trying to get into pedals, I think I wanted my first pedal to be, do you know the company JHS pedals?
Yeah, good pedals.
Yeah, the one I wanted to get was the color box.
Which one is that? What does it do?
It's like 6 things in one. It acts as overdrive, distortion, fuzz.
Right.
But it's also got a 3-band EQ.
Mm-hmm.
It acts as a DI box.
Right. Yeah, it's I shy away from kind of do it all in one box kind of things, because I find that it's usually pretty compromised at every level. It does a lot of things, but it actually is harder. I like things like I like my amps. I like pedals that just have a few knobs on it. They sound great as soon as you plug it in. You can dial it in and it does a great thing. A great chorus, a great flange, like a Phase 90 is just one knob. It's just the speed. But the actual effect level is very pleasing, and it's, just iconic classic sound. So I'd rather have more pedals that are simpler and easier to dial in than one box that does all these different things,
Well, in defense of the color box, I think
good.
The reason I wanted to get it was because when you think about it, overdrive, distortion, fuzz, they're all basically the same thing.
Same family,
but at different levels, right? But also I suppose you could think of it as like basically 3, or really only 2 things. The dirt and EQ. But also like it acts as a preamp, that pedal. The other thing about it is that it's a preamp pedal. Mm-hmm. And so 3 things: dirt, EQ, preamp. So I think those are things that are far enough apart that you could say they're not stepping over each other by being all in one pedal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I used to use a Boss EQ. They had a graphic EQ pedal. They still do. And it was really cool because for one, it was really transparent for one thing, and you could just use the output as a boost to drive the front end of the amp. But also, if I was playing the telly and I wanted to just kind of fatten up the mid range, a little bit of, a little boost down there. If it was, the Les Paul and I wanted to have the leads give it a little more bite, I would, boosts, around, whatever, 5K or whatever, something in the top, further up on the band. So you could really easily get your guitars, a variety of guitars, to function well on stage, So yeah, I agree with you on that,
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like I said, JHS pedals are very, very good. So I'm sure they did it in an ergonomic way that functions well.
Yeah. I mean, also part of the idea behind that pedal was to he was trying to the guy Josh who builds the pedals, he was trying to replicate the sound of a going DI into a Neve console.
That's a classic sound. Yep. In fact, that's on Led Zeppelin Black Dog. The guitars on that are direct through a couple of leveling amplifiers, compressors, heavily compressed and direct into Neve console, or maybe API. I don't know, but definitely the direct signal is. I'm a big fan of that. I've used a lot in the recording sessions.
Yeah, and I think when I was thinking about getting that, I think I didn't have the Blues Junior yet, so all I have really is this acoustic. The brand is acoustic, and it's an amp for acoustic instruments.
Yeah.
So for a long time, I was playing on that, or I guess you could say I was learning electric on this.
Yep.
And since it just sounds so clean, I figured, would I get an amp or a pedal, like the color box, that can act as the signal processing and then go into the acoustic amp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's a solid approach, definitely. There's, as they say, to use a cliche, there's many ways to skin a cat. More than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's logical. I mean, I think that's it. You in the process of forming your own identity as a player, you kind of use your intellect and your sensibilities to guide you through that process. And then hopefully at the end of it, excuse me, sorry, that's my dog trying to get my attention. You become somebody who has their own voice on the instrument, which is, it's a combination of influences and in each individual's personal sensibilities.
Yeah. And speaking of which, this your most recent record, The Way Is Clear, that came out in what, July?
June
June
5th.
And in the middle of recording that, as you were recording it, did you have a good idea what it was going to be? Did you have a clear vision for it? Well, I suppose maybe you did. It's called The Way Is Clear.
Right. Well, that's actually taken from a line of one of the songs. It's actually the first line of a song called 2020 Vision. And I have a thing about, there's something to be said, and I don't know what it is exactly, about naming the album after a song on the album or a line of a lyrical phrase. But this album was very different than any other I'd done before, because I had started recording and releasing songs as singles, I think about 2 years before. So much of the album was comprised of songs that I would record and just throw out on Spotify and, share around as a new single. And I'd put one out every month and a half or 2 months. And at about the time that I think I had maybe 6 of those, I went in for one more round of sessions, and I knew I just wanted to kind of flesh out the album and complete it. So, and I'd kind of gone on a writing spree. I guess it was about this time last year, maybe in early September. I just kind of popped out 3 songs. I wrote a song for Neil, Autumn in the Rain, and 2020 Vision. And let's see if anyway, I think those are the 3. So, I figured, okay, now they kind of came out in a bunch. I'm going to just get in and record these 3 and button it up and put it out as an album. And it was, I had a little bit of trepidation because, the songs, a lot of the songs had been heard before, but what we did is we reopened the sessions, did a bit more overdubbing, a little bit more mixing, remastered all of them. And lo and behold, the response to the record was great. It was such a fresh listen that it really captivated people much more than the individual singles had done. But by doing that, it allowed me to have my ears on the songs for long enough that if there were any flaws or issues that would bug me later on, I was able to go back and kind of repair those things before being released on the album, which will eventually be on vinyl and CD and stuff like that, you know. Because one thing that's hard when you make records is you got to live with the choices you make, you know. And even on this one, there are a few things that I'm like, damn, I really wish I had dealt with that, you know. There's like an out of time shaker on one part in Autumn in the Rain, which bothers me, you know. It's a real minutia, real, you know. And when you're doing it, you're so deep into the songs that you know, sometimes it's hard to have an objective view of it.
See the forest from the trees.
What's that? Oh, forest to the trees. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, and this I'm gonna do it again. This next album, I'm just writing and recording what will eventually be the next one, and I really liked that process of recording songs individually, releasing them as singles, living with them for a little while, and then, you know, tweaking them one last time before they become the record. You know,
yeah,
good way to go.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of thing where you want to be able to work on it until you think you have it right, but then there's the point where you're like,
you have to.
I spent so much time. I'm really tired. Why not? But it's okay. There, it's done. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even on the night of the session, you have to know when to step away because listener fatigue is a real thing. You stop being able to really hear and make cognitive decisions about what it is you're hearing because your ears are tired and your brain is tired. So you have to kind of know when to step away, and you have to know when to step away from recording and mixing a song as well. You know, so that was what was beautiful about doing it the way I did it, is because I did that. I step away. Okay, it feels done. But then you listen to it for 4 months or so, and it's like, okay, I think I'm willing to open up the session one more time and tweak this one little thing and then remaster it so that I'm, you know, 90% happy with it instead of 82% happy with it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I try to record stuff, and like, I don't really have many friends who are also musicians who are also into recording.
Yep.
And so most, if not all the time, it's just me working on it.
Yep.
And then I feel weird because like I can't trust my own ears. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like I can't trust my own ears because I literally don't have another set of ears to
that's a big
to listen to it, see what's
I think, you know, now that more and more people, I mean, it's great that people are empowered to be able to work at home in the way that they never could before. But what people lose is having another set of ears and an objective voice that can help you guide your decision making. You know, somebody that you can trust, you know, is huge. And that's, you interviewed Tracy. I kind of moved back up to Connecticut from New York City, and up to that point I'd done pretty much everything that I'd ever recorded in studios in New York City or on a couple of occasions at home. And I'd already learned that I always want to work in the studio with another person. Although I produce all my records, having an engineer and a co-producer is absolutely essential. And so when I kind of moved up here, I started looking around for somebody I could work with in that capacity. And luckily I found Tracy Walton and On Deck Studios, and we hit it off and really started to create a really good partnership. And that's been going on for the last few years. So, and I trust him. He's now become the bass player on the tracks as well. And, I trust his sensibilities. I trust his abilities as an engineer he's a songwriter and he's a bass player. So I really gained a lot by teaming up with him, you know?
And, did he worked on The Way Is Clear, did he?
Yeah. Yeah. We did it at his studio, and he engineered it and co-produced it with me. And
okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
Because I remember when I was trying to get in touch with you, I was talking to Tracy. He said you had just finished up a record. like you were mastering it. It's about to be released, and then I look at it. I look at your discography. It was like, oh, his most recent record's from June. Is that the one he was referring to?
Yeah, it must have been, unless trying to think the chronology here of when you reached out to me first, because I had been in to do just a live performance of this kind of hybrid Delta Blues Guns N' Roses cover that I did.
I saw that. It was a cover of Mr. Brownstone.
Yeah.
But you did it as like a
I did it kind of
Delta Blues thing.
Of Booker White. Was kind of, I was going to call it Brownstone a la Booker, but it's too much of a obscure title. So I called it Brownstone Blues. But the most recent album we did was that, so he must have been referring to that, I would assume.
Yeah, and so was what was the experience? This is the first record you've worked with Trace on with Tracy, right?
I know it's the second one actually.
Oh, okay.
The last one I did called Comes with the Fall.
Okay.
That was the first full length project that I did there. I had kind of moved up here and found him because the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to expand my videography. So I, that's how I found him. I kind of cast around looking at local local bands, videos and things like that. And I saw the name of his band, Belle of the Fall, and I think I saw Julia Autumn Ford's video, which I really liked. And so I reached out to him, and we did a live in the studio video similar to the Brownstone Blues one, but it was an original thing called Ode to Pain. So we did it. It wasn't technically live. I laid it down live, and then he overdubbed some bass, and Julia put on some harmonies, and a flautist, a friend of mine from New York City, by way of Tokyo, named Mayu Saiki, put on flute. Came out really well. So I was like, okay, this might be the good way forward to do the thing. And so yeah, we went in and recorded Comes with the Fall in 2016, I think. I can't remember. I think it was done in 2016 and released in 2017, or done in 2017 and released in 2018. I forget. I usually put out an album every year and a half or 2 years. But yeah, so it was good. It was a very positive experience. And then we started in the whole process of recording singles that would eventually become this album.
Now, I've listened to the record. I think it's great. And I think my favorite track is probably You Muse Me. Because, I don't know, there's something about when just hearing some rock and roll and, like having like really good players come together and just rip out a track like that,
Yeah, that one is it's one of my favorites too. I got to kind of play almost like a rockabilly style guitar solo on it, and it has a little bit of that classic rock and roll kind of sound.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of tricky things, time signatures in the bridge, and the transitions are really difficult, deceptively so. So it was good that I was able to team up with the drummer from the Spin Doctors, Aaron Comas, who's an old friend of mine, monster drummer. And, he's a real song drummer, but he has amazing technique, and he can pretty much go anywhere you want to go. So that last round of songs that I told you that we recorded to button up the album, he's the drummer on all of those. And he really just made it swing, and just locked in and played all the parts and with precision and panache, and then of course Tracy's a monstrous bass player too. So the three of us really just banged that one out. And then I kind of went in and did, overdub some leads, and there it was. Oh, and Glenn Nelson played some great organ and piano on that as well. So yeah, very satisfying. Very good track. I love that one.
Did that keyboardist play any other tracks on the record?
He did. Let me think about it. Oh, I have one right here. I can tell you. He played on 2020 Vision. Yeah, he played organ, mellotron, and electric piano on that one. And he played on... Did he play on Autumn in the Rain? No, he didn't. He played on... I thought maybe he played on organ on A Song for Neil, too. Yeah. So he was on a handful of them.
Yeah. And what exactly is the story behind A Song for Neil?
I wrote it right after. Are you familiar with an artist named Neil Casal?
I am not.
I first became aware of him. He was the lead guitar player in Ryan Adams and the Cardinals. And he had replaced an acquaintance of mine in that band, this guy named J.P. Bowersock, who was also a great guitar player. But I was really impressed with his playing, with Neil Casal's playing, and then he went on to join Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes. He was in the Chris Robinson Brotherhood. Kind of got into him and learned. I liked his approach as a guitar player. He was kind of influenced by Jerry Garcia and by Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones. And so I got more and more into him, and then discovered that he was just a phenomenal singer-songwriter in his own right. So I started to just really become obsessed with, particularly very last album he made. And then he committed suicide inexplicably in the beginning of September last year. And I was going through some problems myself with my own sort of mental health, and it was a tough time because it happened as I was deep in my own struggle. But as is pretty typical when I'm going, a patch of depression or whatever, I usually pull myself out of it by starting to write again. I start to be able to hear music and I'm like, okay, this is happening. I chase the muse and it'll get me out of this. But he ended his life right at the time when I was in a pretty scary place myself. So that song just kind of came out, and I dedicated it to him in a way, but it was sort of more about the way people perceive suicide from the outside. You know, it was about him and how much I admired him, but also kind of like my own thing that has kept me from going that far down the path, you know? So that's kind of the deepest number on the whole album, you know? Emotionally, that's the one that's my favorite, you know?
I think when I first saw the track listing, I saw Song for Neil, and I hear it, and I'm like, he's not talking about Neil Young.
No. And Neil Young spelled differently too.
Yeah, it's spelled with an I. I'm like, I wonder, like, because all these the people you list off that he played for, like, I know all those bands.
Yeah.
I'm like, but then, you know, it's it makes you wonder about, like, all the, like, those sidemen that are kind of left nameless because, oh, it's Bryan Adams, and then also his backing band, or, you know, it's
yeah, well, that's you bring up a really valid point, because, you know, throughout my early career in the 90s, I was in a band that really took off, and we were touring nationally. We had a record deal. You know, we came just shy of really breaking big. We were kind of like a grungy Southern rock band, Southern sounding rock band, bluesy, but definitely a lot of that 90s sound influenced by what was going on in Seattle. We were kind of New York's answer to that. But when it was all said and done, I had poured my heart and soul into this thing that didn't bear my name on the masthead. So having written all the songs, basically led the band for 10 years, you know, booked so many gigs, just been the guy who got up in the morning and dealt with all the stuff when everybody else could basically ignore it. When that was done, I was like, I'm never going to have my name underneath a band ever again, because anything I join, I'm going to be doing lots and lots of hard work for. So, you know, it's got to have Cosmo Sunshine on it. You know, I think a lot of people disappear into the band identity.
Yeah. Or you can make it like a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Like, you still have your name up front, and also these other guys.
Well, yeah, I've done that. I had Cosmo Sunshine and the Butterfly Effect a few years ago. You know, there was the Cosmo Sunshine Band. Yeah. You know, that's perfectly acceptable, but no more will I be in a band that's, you know, because it's just too lopsided. The whole thing is, you know, it's very rare that you're in a band situation and it's really democratic and everybody does their bit, you know.
Maybe you can form a super group called Casey and the Cosmo Sunshine Band.
You know, that's why I didn't like the Cosmo Sunshine Band, because it was like too close to the Casey and the Sunshine Band. Yeah. You know.
So, you say you're in the middle of recording other stuff now.
I'm actually just getting ready to get started. Got some songs ready to go. Yep.
Right. Do you think you have an idea what the next record's going to be like?
For me, it's I think it's just going to be a further refinement of what I've been doing. Just kind of getting better and better. The last time I went into recording an album with sort of a set idea of how I wanted it to sound was 2 albums ago. It was called the Butterfly Fight Club. And at the time, I was really obsessed with quiet lyrical music. I took a conscious step away from sort of guitar heroism. I think there's only one guitar solo on the whole album, and it's, I wouldn't say predominantly acoustic, but much cleaner tones, and acoustic songs occupy at least a third of the record. And I was obsessed with the idea of music that you could put on a Sunday morning and be transported. So even though there are some rock moments on the album, that was consciously, I went in with the band I had at the time and recorded it 100% live to analog tape, and then did a couple of overdubs, and it was 16 track. I'd set up that kind of limitation. It was going to be very vibey, very live sounding analog, and it worked really, really well. But the last 2 have just been kind of like just trying to be better and, get better at the whole process. Songwriting, engineering, playing, the whole thing. Production, I mean, I don't really engineer, as you can tell by my lack of ability to get the Scarlett set up quickly. Production and writing and performing are my main functions.
Yeah. Do you think would you want to get better at engineering?
Oh yeah, I would definitely. And I was an assistant engineer in a recording studio in New York City for a bunch of years.
What studio?
It was called Coyote Studios in Brooklyn. It was pretty well known. A lot of, big records came out of there at that time, but they were known for being a real analog studio. And when I left was right when they had installed their full Pro Tools suite. So I'm good at cutting tape and placing microphones and using compressors and, that kind of thing. But, there are people who get on Pro Tools and just can fly. I have a project with a guy named Matt Stein in New York City. It's a production duo, and we've been working on a record for the last couple of years. And he's been working with Pro Tools since before it existed, and he just, it's like a part of him. He plays Pro Tools like I play guitar, It's amazing. I'll never be like that.
Yeah, I am. Being someone who's just getting into recording recently, like in the past couple of years, I think like the digital, like learning about how digital recording works is a beast within itself. And like I think I might be comfortable now. I might be.
Right.
But then I think about all these people who, like yourself, maybe who are doing tape most, if not all the time. I'm thinking like, I don't know, would I want to do tape? Would it be worth it to me? Like,
well, honestly, probably not.
To do it.
Well, it's because it's really expensive. It's a reel of tape is going to cost $140 or at least, and studios that focus on analog, there's a lot of kind of upkeep that has to be done. A tape machine has to be calibrated before you can record on it. Yeah. It's just labor intensive. So when you go into it, you have to do it as a real conscious aesthetic approach. Whereas even now with plugins in Pro Tools and other platforms, there are plugins that are models of analog tape, that really, really duplicate that sound of tape compression and light, harmonic distortion, which makes it much more pleasing to the ear. So even though I'm a big analog guy, I have a huge collection of vinyl at home. I'd say for 99% of the time, the ease of use and the quality with which in the box recording has become, I would say I would err on that side 99% of the time. I like to do a hybrid. Like, I think it's good if you can record bass and drums on an analog tape and then dump it into Pro Tools. That's a great way to go. But seldom is there the opportunity to do that. You know, most studios are just Pro Tools studios, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think like I'm, as someone who's trying to record stuff on my own, and like it is gonna, for the most part it's gonna be all on my own. So I'm trying to learn all I can about all the stuff, and
it's a lot.
It's, I mean, it took forever for me to learn guitar, and now it's gonna take me another forever to like learn how to record and mix my own stuff.
Yeah,
and like you said, you also need another pair of ears just to make sure it's not sounding like crap.
It really helps. But, you know, as with anything else, you learn by doing. You know, you have to allow yourself to make mistakes. You know, and I mean, I've done 2 records at home at different stages in my life, and both of them proved unequivocally that I need to work with another co-producer engineer and not take, because I engineered both of those records. One was done on a like a digital workstation in the mid 2000s, and the second one I did on Pro Tools on a computer at home in my loft in New York City. And they have their merits, but they're really flawed, you know. But you just have to learn by falling down, you know.
Yeah, I definitely. There are mistakes on like stuff I've done that, like I recorded guitar parts, but I forgot to hit the button to like change the input impedance. So I'm like, oh well, I don't want to re-record those though. So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah. Well, that's what it is, and you got to live with it, you know. And sometimes, you know what? Sometimes mistakes and flaws are the human element that make recordings sound good. You know, you got to leave the mistakes in. There's always like a line, like what would Keith Richards do? You know, would he leave it in? Yeah, probably. You know, probably.
What would Keith do?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like I've also had discussions with people about how you know, now in a Pro Tools Beat Detective kind of world now, we're like everything's kind of quantized.
Yep.
We're tuning all the notes to be in pitch.
Yep.
Perfectly in pitch, perfectly on time. Everything's getting kind of manufactured, and kind of take the soul out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then what's even worse than that is that people are so trained to hear music that way that when they hear things that are a little out of tune, or the time, you know, flexible time or whatever, it sounds wrong to them, you know, which is really sad because, you know, songs, I'm a big fan of hearing songs speed up and slow down in a musical way, you know. And that's just it makes it swing, it makes it breathe, you know. And when everything is, tuned and quantized to death, it just becomes further and further from legitimate human expression.
Yeah, at that point you might as well make an electronic record,
right? You know? And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I love electronic music. That one project I mentioned with my partner Matt Stein is sort of a hybrid between my earthy blues and rock roots and his electronic foundation. So it's a real meeting in between those two polar extremes, and it's working really well. And electronic music can be wonderful, but when you have music that's supposed to be rock music, but you hear auto-tune going on and you hear that, it was beat detectived, it's quantized to within a nanosecond of perfect time, it loses its soul.
Yeah, I think like the rule of thumb I try to follow is probably like, if it's got organic instruments, if the foundation is organic instruments that you're recording, then it should probably quote unquote feel organic. They should be played, live, and not like forced into a perfect rhythm and pitch and whatever.
Agreed. I'd say for the most part, I agree with you 100%. And hopefully it's like when you first the adjustment you make when you first go back and listen to a recording from the 1930s. It's you kind of have to train your ears to be able to hear it right. In a way, it's sometimes the presentation kind of puts you off, and then you have to kind of have the patience and the attention span to realize that there's something very important that needs to be taken in.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened when I first started listening to Robert Johnson.
Yep.
Because it's it was him and his guitar recorded in a hotel room.
Yep. It's really
30s.
grainy and yep. But that's part of its charm. I mean, that's I wouldn't want it any other way.
And also it was just like I'm hearing it, I'm like, oh, that's just a dude on guitar.
Yeah.
But then like you have to live with it for a little bit, especially like with those songs by Robert Johnson. It was like it I had to give it a few more lessons, and it just like it got underneath.
Yeah.
Skin.
Well, that's some of my favorite things in the world are things that I didn't immediately get. I mean, I remember, for instance, when I first heard Soundgarden in the late 80s, and, it was still in that realm of, I was into Metallica. I was not a big hair metal guy, but you hear so much of what is the musical zeitgeist. And then this band comes sort of out of the blue playing heavy rock. But I was like, not sure that I really liked it at first, but then I kept listening, and then they became arguably my favorite band post Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and the Stones. Like, of that generation of the grunge era, they're my favorite band by a mile, because they had their own sonic signature,
Yeah. I'm also a huge fan of Soundgarden. Like, they're my favorite band from the grunge era.
Yep.
And the record that really got me was Super Unknown.
Fantastic. Yep.
And I remember the first time that was actually one of the few records I've listened to where the first time through, like everything just hit right. And I'm like, I fucking love this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first time I heard them was the album Louder Than Love, which was, I think it came out in 88 or 89, probably 89.
Right. Yeah.
And then, but the one that really got me was Bad Motorfinger.
Oh yeah.
Because that was kind of like in my era of the 90s, early 90s when that scene started to really blow open, and that album is just so good,
Yeah.
It's just punchy and inventive, and of course Chris Cornell is as good a singer as there's ever been in rock and roll.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, and then they're, as much as they're very loud, rocky riffage, there's still like substance behind it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of musicality in it.
Yeah.
It's the music nerd can dig into all the weird time signatures and the fact that there's a lot of non-diatonic, angular, harmonic structure in the songs, and there's a lot to dig into there. Plus, they have some just plain great songs.
Yeah.
Especially by Super Unknown, Fell on Black Days, Spoon Man. Those are both just killer songs.
Yeah, and I'm I think because they're just good, like they're just great tracks. The like music nerd peculiarities just kind of fly by, and you can just enjoy it. But then you can still like realize, oh, Fell on Black Days in 6.
Yeah,
that's weird.
Yep. Yeah, they had an amazing knack, and I like to do this myself, for writing things in odd time signatures and have it groove.
Yeah.
Not herky jerky, but really, have a real pocket to it.
Yeah.
Can be like, oh wait, that's in an odd meter.
Yeah. Or like one of my favorite tracks is My Wave, and that's such like a grooven riff.
Yep.
And then you realize it's in 5. And it's like, how does this feel this like the riff feels so right.
Yep.
But then you realize it's in 5.
Yep. Well, if you listen, let's see, on The Way Is Clear, the song 2020 Vision is slow 7/4 or if you subdivide it into a bar of 4 and a bar of 3, and but it grooves. You wouldn't. I don't think you'd hear it right away unless you're attuned to such things and think, oh, that's a weird time signature. Because it just grooves. That's and also with odd meter stuff, after a certain number of repetitions, it lands on some permutation of 4.
Yeah.
So it's just it's all in how you do it, how you treat it.
Repetition legitimizes. That's what.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, but also I think part of what drew me to Soundgarden was Kim Thayil's lead playing, which he's a good player.
Yeah,
but like the lines he plays can be weird.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but that's good. Weird is good. He doesn't sound like anybody else. And it's hard, like as a player, to not sort of measure yourself against all these people. Like, I'm not a huge fan, but I recognize John Mayer as being an excellent guitar player. Any number of guitar players who do all these amazing things, you try and measure yourself against them and, say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that yet. But in reality, that's never been the objective. The objective has always been to have my own voice. That's been since day one. I wanted to have my own identifiable sound, and if you've gotten to the point where you are a guitar player like the greats, I'm not claiming I am at this point, but if you can get to the point where you play a couple of notes and somebody's like, that's Jerry Garcia or Joe Walsh or whoever, and Kim Thayil is like that. You hear Kim Thayil play a lead and you're like, there he is,
Yeah.
So that's something to aspire to. And it's like it just happens. You can't train yourself to sound like yourself,
No, not quite.
You just go about your business and,
Yeah, like most of my lead playing has been blues, but like it just sounds like poorly played blues, and so I'm desperately trying to figure out how to play lead, but like I feel like I'm still not to the point where I'm not thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I'm too much in my head thinking like, how do I play cool? How do I play cool licks in the moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a common phenomenon, and I can be in that space too, especially if there's a lot of chord movement, and especially if it's non-diatonic chord movement, so you can't just lay into one scale or mode or whatever and just play patterns. But one thing that I think helped me when I was early on, even though I was learning blues licks, I learned all the modes of the major scale and started to be able to, superimpose them in different keys and different positions around the neck. So it gave me a little bit more to draw from than just the stock blues licks. Then I had to actually train myself to not play so modally all the time, because you have to play melody. You can't just play scales.
Yeah.
So, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
I could think of a lot worse things.
Yeah. And I don't know, I suppose, I mean, we're always trying to, improve.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone is ever anyone in their right mind ever thinks, "Oh, I'm there. I'm already there."
No,
you know what I mean?
Nobody does. Believe me, I know some absolute world-class guitar players who still know that they have weak strengths and weaknesses that, don't line up with every other. And I know a lot of guitar players like, Warren Haynes in particular, who has great admiration for guitar players who have far less technique than he does, but have something to offer in terms of their expression, 'cause that's what's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, yeah, it should always be expression over flashiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're coming back to it. Not flashy playing, expression.
That's it. That's the paradigm.
Yeah. Well, we've gone on for a while. This is at least lately, this is about the typical length of an episode.
Okay. Great.
I'd like to thank you for talking to me.
I appreciate you getting in touch. I really do.
Your most recent record, "The Way Is Clear," is out. It came out in June. It's a good record. Anyone listening to this podcast, check it out if you want.
It's out there on all the platforms. And if you go to my Bandcamp, just Cosmos Sunshine Bandcamp, you can order CDs and stuff. And also my whole discography is there as well.
Yep, there it is. All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on, Cosmos.
Thank you, Benson.
It's nice getting to know you. Nice meeting you and getting to know you. Yeah. And I think it was a fun talk, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Thanks, man.
Bye. And I guess I'll see you around soon.
Yes, sir. Have a good day.
All right.
Cheers, bro.